The lone sound of weeping carried across the dusty Wyoming prairie, rising above the gentle sigh of tall grasses in the autumn wind. Olivia Harper clutched the worn leather Bible to her chest, tears streaming down her dirt-smudged face as she knelt beside her family's burned-out wagon. She hadn't heard the approach of horseback riders until a shadow fell across her crumpled form. "Madam," the voice was deep, tentative. "You all right?" Olivia looked up through tear-blurred eyes at the tall figure silhouetted against the October sky. The year was 1876, and she was completely alone in the vast expanse of Wyoming territory. The stranger dismounted, his spurs jingling softly as his boots hit the earth. His face came into focus, weathered by sun and wind, but kind, with eyes the color of a summer sky and a neatly trimmed sandy beard beneath a battered brown hat. "They're gone," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Mama, Papa, everyone, cholera took them all." She looked down at the Bible in her hands. "This is all I have left of her." The man knelt beside her, removing his hat respectfully. "Name's Gabriel Xavier, madam. Most folks call me Gabe." He gestured to the Bible. "May I?" Olivia hesitated, then nodded slightly. "Let me read a verse with you," he said softly. "Sometimes the good Lord's words are the only comfort to be found in times like these." He gently took the Bible, his calloused hands a stark contrast to the delicate pages as he carefully opened it. A pressed wildflower fell from between the pages, a purple prairie clover, still vibrant despite being dried. "This was her favorite," Olivia murmured. She said it reminded her that beauty can thrive even in harsh places. Gabe nodded, understanding in his eyes as he found the Book of Psalms. His voice was steady and reassuring as he read, "The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit." The words washed over Olivia like a soothing balm. She had been traveling with her family from Missouri to Oregon when the sickness struck. One by one, they had succumbed, until she alone remained, too weak herself to do more than dig shallow graves before the fever broke and left her alive but utterly alone. "I don't know what to do now," she admitted, her voice small against the vastness of the prairie. Gabe looked at the smoking remains of the wagon, then back to her pale face. "Miss Harper, Olivia Harper. Miss Harper, my ranch is about 10 miles north of here. My sister Ruth lives there too. You're welcome to stay until you decide your next steps." He paused. "Unless you've got other kin nearby," Olivia shook her head. "No, no one." "Then let's gather what can be salvaged. You can ride with me and I'll send some of my men back for anything worth saving." As they sorted through the meager remains of her family's possessions, Olivia felt numb. 22 years of life had not prepared her for such profound loss. She had been the oldest of 5 children, and now she was the last Harper left alive. She wrapped her mother's Bible carefully in a clean cloth and tucked it into the small bundle of possessions Gabe helped her collect. The ride to the Xavier Ranch was mostly silent. Olivia sat stiffly in front of Gabe on his horse, acutely aware of his strong arms around her as he held the reins. The steady rhythm of the horse's hooves and the warmth of another human being beside her were the only things keeping her from shattering completely. As they crested a hill, Gabe pointed to a collection of buildings nestled in a green valley below. "That's Willow Creek Ranch." "Not much, but it's home." The ranch house was a solid 2-story structure of timber and stone, with a wide porch wrapping around the front. Several outbuildings and corrals spread out behind it, and cattle grazed on the surrounding grasslands. It looked well kept and prosperous, a far cry from the hardscrabble farming Olivia had known all her life. A woman with honey blonde hair appeared on the porch as they approached, shading her eyes against the setting sun. "Gabe, who've you got there?" she called. "This is Miss Olivia Harper," Gabe explained as he helped Olivia dismount. "Found her out by Cottonwood Creek. Her family's gone cholera. Miss Harper, this is my sister, Ruth Xavier." Ruth's expression softened immediately. "Oh, you poor dear, come inside right away. You look ready to drop." Olivia found herself guided into a warm kitchen that smelled of baking bread and coffee. Ruth's efficient hands soon had her seated at a sturdy oak table with a steaming cup of tea and a plate of food before her. Though she had little appetite, Olivia forced herself to eat, knowing her body needed nourishment. "You'll stay in the spare room upstairs," Ruth declared, brooking no argument. "It's all made up already." "I don't want to impose," Olivia began. "Nonsense," Ruth interrupted. "Winter's coming on. No one should be alone with grief like yours, especially not with snow in the forecast." Gabe, who had been quietly watching from the doorway, nodded in agreement. "You're welcome here as long as you need, Miss Harper." That night, in the unfamiliar room with its simple but comfortable furnishings, Olivia wept again over her mother's Bible. She ran her fingers over the inscription on the inside cover. "To Mary, my beloved wife, may God's words light your path always." Thomas Harper, 1851. Her parents had been married for 25 years before the disease took them both within days of each other. The next morning, Olivia awoke to the sounds of a working ranchman calling to one another, the lowing of cattle, the clang of metal on metal from what must have been a blacksmith's forge. For a moment she was disoriented, then the crushing weight of remembrance fell upon her again. She dressed in her one remaining clean dress, carefully braided her long auburn hair, and made her way downstairs. The kitchen was empty but for a young girl of about 16 who was kneading dough at the table. "Oh, good morning," the girl said cheerfully. "I'm Abigail, but everyone calls me Abby. I help Ruth with the cooking and such. You must be Miss Harper. Please call me Olivia." "Miss Ruth said to tell you there's coffee on the stove and bread in the crock if you're hungry. She's gone to help with a foaling mare." Olivia poured herself a cup of the strong black coffee and took a piece of bread. "Is there something I could do to help? I'm not used to sitting idle." Abby looked her over assessingly. "Can you cook?" "Yes, and sew and garden. I've kept house since my mother fell ill the first time years ago." "Well then," Abby said with a grin, "you can help me prepare dinner for the ranch hands. There's 15 men to feed, plus the family." Grateful for the distraction, Olivia threw herself into the work. By midday, she had helped prepare a hearty stew, baked 2 more loaves of bread, and was rolling out pie crust when Ruth returned. "You didn't have to work on your first day here," Ruth said, though her tone was approving. "I needed to," Olivia replied simply. Ruth seemed to understand. "Well, you've certainly got a knack for pastry. Gabe will be pleased, he's got a terrible sweet tooth." Olivia felt her cheeks warm slightly at the mention of the rancher. There was something about his quiet strength that had calmed her during the worst moment of her life. The ranch hands filed in for the noon meal, a boisterous group of men ranging from grizzled veterans to fresh-faced boys barely older than Olivia herself. Gabe came in last, stopping short when he saw Olivia serving alongside Abby and Ruth. "Miss Harper," he said, removing his hat, "you're looking better today." "Thank you, Mr. Xavier, and thank you again for your kindness yesterday." He nodded, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Call me Gabe, please. Mr. Xavier was my father." As the days passed, Olivia found a rhythm to life at Willow Creek. She insisted on earning her keep, helping with cooking, mending, and even learning to make candles and soap under Ruth's patient tutelage. The physical work helped exhaust her enough to sleep, though nightmares often woke her. Leaving her gasping and tearful in the dark, on such nights, she would light a lamp and read from her mother's Bible, finding comfort in the familiar passages marked by her mother's careful hand. Sometimes she would go downstairs to the kitchen for tea and find Gabe there, unable to sleep for his own reasons. "The war," he explained one night, a month after her arrival, when she found him staring into the dying fire. "Sometimes I'm back there in Virginia with the cannons and the screams." Olivia nodded, understanding all too well how memories could ambush in the quiet hours. "Were you with the Union forces?" "Yes, enlisted in '63 when I was 18, saw things no man should see." He glanced at her. "But that's a long time past now. How did you come to be in Wyoming?" She asked, settling into a chair across from him, her mother's Bible in her lap as always. "My father brought us west after the war. He'd had enough of fighting and dying, bought this land cheap from a man heading to California. Gabe's expression grew distant. Pa died 5 years back. Hart gave out during a blizzard when he was bringing in strays. I'm sorry, he shrugged. It happens out here, life is hard, but it's good too. He nodded toward the Bible. You read that every night. Yes, it helps me feel close to her still. Olivia's fingers traced the worn cover. She used to read to us children every evening. Even when she was sick, she'd have me bring it to her and she'd find passages about strength and hope. Your mother sounds like she was a remarkable woman. She was. Olivia felt tears welling again. I miss her so much. Gabe reached across the space between them and gently took her hand. His fingers were rough with calluses, but his touch was tender. The pain never fully goes away, but it does get easier to bear. I promise you that. In that moment of shared understanding, something shifted between them. It wasn't love, not yet, but the foundation for it was laid in the quiet kitchen, with the embers of the fire casting a soft glow, and their shared grief creating a bridge between two wounded hearts. The winter of 1876-77 was harsh, with bitter cold and heavy snows isolating Willow Creek Ranch for weeks at a time. Olivia found herself growing closer to both Gabe and Ruth, learning about their lives and sharing stories of her own family. Ruth, only 2 years older than Olivia at 24, had been engaged before the war, but lost her fiancé at Gettysburg. She had never found another man she wished to marry, devoting herself instead to helping her brother run the ranch. You should have your own family, Olivia said one afternoon as they mended shirts together. Ruth smiled wistfully. Perhaps someday, but I'm content for now. She glanced slyly at Olivia. What about you? You're young and pretty. Surely you had suitors back in Missouri. Olivia shook her head. There was one boy, Joseph Miller. We grew up together and everyone expected us to marry someday, but he went west 2 years ago to California, said he'd send for me when he was established. She sighed. I never heard from him again. His loss, Ruth declared firmly. And speaking of men who appreciate a good woman, have you noticed how my brother looks at you? Olivia blushed deeply. Ruth, don't Ruth me, the blonde woman laughed. I've seen the way you look at him too when you think no one's watching. It was true that Olivia had begun to notice Gabe in a different way. The initial gratitude for his rescue had developed into admiration for his quiet leadership and the gentle way he handled both animals and people. At 31, he was 9 years her senior, but the age difference seemed meaningless compared to the understanding that had grown between them. As Christmas approached, the ranch became a flurry of preparation despite its isolation. Olivia helped Ruth and Abby decorate the house with pine boughs and red ribbons. They baked gingerbread and prepared gifts for everyone on the ranch, mostly practical items like new mittens or carved wooden items that Gabe produced in the evenings by the fire. On Christmas Eve, everyone gathered in the main room of the ranch house. One of the cowboys played the fiddle while another accompanied on harmonica. They sang carols, and Ruth read the nativity story from the family Bible. Afterward, Gabe asked Olivia if he might speak with her privately. Heart pounding, she followed him onto the porch, where they stood wrapped in heavy coats, their breath forming clouds in the frigid air. The night was clear, with stars blazing against the velvet blackness and moonlight turning the snow-covered landscape to silver. I have something for you, Gabe said, reaching into his pocket. He withdrew a small wooden box. I made it myself. Olivia opened it to find a delicate wooden pendant carved in the shape of a prairie clover and polished to a warm glow. It hung on a simple leather cord. Oh, Gabe, she breathed. It's beautiful. I noticed how carefully you keep that pressed flower in your mother's Bible. He looked suddenly uncertain. If it's too soon or if you don't care for it, no, she interrupted, clutching the pendant. I love it, truly. He smiled then, relief evident in his features. May I? He asked, gesturing to the necklace. She nodded, turning around and lifting her hair. His fingers brushed the back of her neck as he fastened the cord, sending a shiver through her that had nothing to do with the cold. Olivia, he said softly as she turned back to face him. I know you came here under terrible circumstances, and I would never want to take advantage of your situation, but I find myself thinking of you constantly." She looked up at him, this man who had become so important to her in such a short time. "I think of you too," she admitted. "More than I probably should." His smile was like the sun breaking through clouds. Slowly, giving her every chance to withdraw, he leaned down and pressed his lips to hers in a gentle, questioning kiss. Olivia responded tentatively at first, then with growing confidence as something warm and wonderful unfurled within her. When they parted, both were breathing quickly despite the cold air. Gabe rested his forehead against hers. "I'd like to court you properly, Olivia Harper, if you'll allow it." "Yes," she whispered. "I'd like that very much." They returned to the celebration inside, where Ruth took one look at their flushed faces and knowing smiles and gave Olivia a subtle thumbs up when no one else was looking. As winter slowly released its grip on the land, Gabe and Olivia's courtship flourished. He took her on sleigh rides when the weather permitted, taught her to ride horseback, and spent long evenings talking by the fire. Olivia continued to mourn her family, but the sharp edge of grief began to dull, allowing space for new happiness to grow. Spring brought new challenges as the ranch work intensified with calving season and preparations for cattle drives. Olivia threw herself into learning everything she could about ranch life, determined to be an asset rather than a burden. She proved to have a natural way with the horses and helped Ruth establish a larger vegetable garden than the ranch had ever had before. In April, as wildflowers began to carpet the prairie, Gabe took Olivia riding to a hilltop overlooking the ranch. Purple prairie clover was just beginning to bloom, and he picked a sprig for her to press in her mother's Bible alongside the one that had been there before. "I've been thinking," he said as they sat on a blanket, sharing a simple picnic, "about the future." Olivia's heart quickened. "Oh, this land, it's beautiful, isn't it?" He gestured to the sweeping vista before them. "When my father brought us here, it was nothing but potential. Now look at it." Willow Creek Ranch had indeed prospered under Gabe's management. The herd had grown, the buildings were well maintained, and there was always enough food on the table. "You've done well here," she agreed, "but something's been missing." He turned to face her fully. "A home needs more than just walls and a roof. It needs love to make it complete." Olivia's breath caught as Gabe reached into his pocket and withdrew a small gold ring. "It was my mother's," he explained. "Ruth kept it for me, said I'd know when it was right to pass it on." He took Olivia's hand in his. "I love you, Olivia Harper. I know it hasn't been very long, and if you need more time, I understand, but I want to build a life with you. Will you marry me?" Tears sprang to Olivia's eyes, happy ones this time. "Yes," she said, her voice steady and sure. "Yes, Gabe, I will." He slipped the ring onto her finger where it fit as if it had been made for her. Then he pulled her into his arms, kissing her with a passion that left them both breathless. "I wish my parents could have met you," she said later as they rode back to the ranch. "They would have loved you." "I like to think mine would have approved of you too," he replied. "My mother would have especially appreciated another woman who understands the healing power of faith." Ruth was ecstatic when they announced their engagement that evening. "Finally," she exclaimed, hugging them both. "I thought you'd never ask her, Gabe." Plans were made for a June wedding, to be held at the ranch with the local preacher riding out to perform the ceremony. Olivia insisted on making her own wedding dress, working on it in secret during the evenings while Gabe was busy with ranch accounts. But the course of true love is rarely smooth, and in mid-May, trouble arrived at Willow Creek in the form of 3 rough-looking riders. Olivia was alone in the kitchen, kneading bread dough when they appeared at the door. "We're looking for Gabe Xavier," the leader said, a tall man with a scar running from his left eye to his jaw. "He's out checking the north pasture," Olivia replied, suddenly uneasy. "Can I help you?" The man's eyes narrowed. "You his woman, I'm his fiancée," she said, lifting her chin. "Olivia Harper." Something flickered in the man's expression. "Harper, any relation to Thomas Harper from Missouri?" Olivia froze, her hands white with flour. He was my father. He died last fall. The man exchanged looks with his companions. Interesting coincidence. My name's Franklin Reed. Your daddy and I had some unfinished business. He smiled, but it didn't reach his cold eyes. Guess I'll just have to settle it with Xavier instead. Before Olivia could respond, Ruth appeared from the pantry. What's going on? Reed touched the brim of his hat with mock politeness. Just passing through, madam. Tell Xavier we'll be back to talk business. With that, the three men mounted their horses and rode off. Who were they? Ruth asked, frowning. I don't know, Olivia said, her hands trembling. But that man, Reed, he knew my father. When Gabe returned that evening, Olivia and Ruth told him about the visitors. His expression darkened as he listened. Franklin Reed, he muttered. I know the name. He's got a reputation as a hired gun. What did he mean about having unfinished business with my father? Olivia asked. Gabe shook his head. I don't know, but I aim to find out. Tomorrow I'll ride into town, see what the sheriff might know. That night, Olivia couldn't sleep. She sat up reading her mother's Bible, seeking comfort in the familiar words. When she finally drifted off near dawn, her dreams were troubled by images of her father arguing with a faceless man while her mother wept over an open Bible. Gabe left early the next morning for Clearwater, the small town 20 miles away that served as the nearest outpost of civilization. Olivia spent the day alternating between helping with ranch chores and worrying. By the time Gabe returned at dusk, her nerves were frayed. I found out some things, he said grimly after dinner, when he, Olivia, and Ruth sat alone in the main room. Reed used to work for the Pinkerton Agency, but he was dismissed for excessive force. Since then, he's hired out to whoever will pay him, mostly railroads and big cattle operations pushing out smaller ranchers. But what does he want with us? Ruth asked. We're not in anybody's way out here. Gabe looked at Olivia. It has to do with your father, Liv. Did he ever mention trouble with a man named James Blackwell? Olivia frowned, thinking back. Blackwell? Yes, there was a dispute about land boundaries. Mr. Blackwell claimed our farm encroached on his property, but Papa had the original survey documents proving otherwise. There was a lawsuit, I think, just before we left for Oregon. That fits what the sheriff told me, Gabe nodded. Blackwell lost the suit but swore revenge. Word is he hired Reed to find your father. To do what? Olivia asked, though she feared she knew the answer. To make him pay, Gabe said grimly, and now Reed's tracked you here instead. But why would he care about me? I don't own anything from that farm anymore. Revenge doesn't always make sense, Ruth interjected. And if Blackwell paid Reed to settle a score, he might feel obligated to do something now that he's found you. Gabe stood, pacing the room. Or he might think you have something of value, documents, maybe, or information. Olivia gasped suddenly. The Bible. Mama kept important papers in the back cover. Land deeds, birth certificates, everything. They rushed to Olivia's room, where she carefully removed the Bible from its place beside her bed. She turned to the back cover, where a small pocket had been sewn into the leather. Inside were several folded documents, yellowed with age. These are the original land grants, she said, spreading them on the bed. And here's the survey Papa used in court. She paused, frowning. But there's something else here. She withdrew a sealed envelope, addressed simply to my daughter. The handwriting was her father's. With trembling fingers, Olivia broke the seal and unfolded the letter inside. My dearest Olivia, she read aloud, if you are reading this, then I am gone from this world. There is something you must know. The dispute with James Blackwell goes deeper than land boundaries. Years ago, before you were born, Blackwell and I were partners in a venture that led to the discovery of a silver deposit on what is now our farm. We agreed to share the profits, but Blackwell attempted to claim it all for himself. I secured the legal rights, but we never developed the mine, as your mother feared it would bring trouble. Blackwell has never forgiven what he sees as a betrayal. The exact location of the silver vein is marked on the enclosed map. Use this knowledge wisely, my child. Your loving father, Thomas Harper. Olivia stared at the small map that had been folded within the letter. It showed the boundaries of the Harper farm with an X marked in the northeastern corner. Silver, Gabe breathed. No wonder Reed tracked you here. If Blackwell hired him to find your father and recover that map, then he won't stop until he gets it, Ruth finished grimly. We should take this to the sheriff, Olivia said, gathering the documents. Gabe nodded. First thing tomorrow, tonight, I'll have the men take extra watches. Reed won't catch us unprepared, but Franklin Reed was not a man to wait. Shortly after midnight, Olivia was awakened by the sound of gunfire. She scrambled from bed, grabbing her robe and her mother's Bible before rushing into the hallway. Gabe was already there, rifle in hand. Stay with Ruth, he ordered, his voice tense. Lock yourselves in the root cellar. What's happening? Olivia demanded. Reed and his men are making their move. Go, Olivia, please. The urgency in his voice brooked no argument. Olivia found Ruth already heading for the stairs, a shotgun clutched in her hands. Together, they made their way to the kitchen and through the trapdoor that led to the cool storage space beneath the house. What about Gabe? Olivia whispered as they huddled in the darkness. He knows what he's doing, Ruth assured her, though her voice trembled. The ranch hands are all armed. They'll protect the house. More shots rang out, followed by shouts. Olivia clutched her mother's Bible to her chest, praying fervently for Gabe's safety. The next hour was the longest of Olivia's life. The sounds of conflict above eventually died away, leaving an eerie silence. When the trapdoor finally opened, she and Ruth held their breaths until Gabe's voice called down to them. It's over, he said. You can come up now. They emerged to find the kitchen intact, but Gabe sporting a bloody bandage on his left arm. Just a graze, he assured them, seeing Olivia's horrified expression. Reed's men weren't expecting us to be ready for them. 2 ran off, but we captured Reed. Outside, the ranch hands had tied Reed to a post by the corral. The hired gun looked considerably less imposing, with a bloody cut above his eye and his hands bound behind him. Tell us why you're really here, Gabe demanded. Reed spat on the ground. Just following orders. Blackwell wants what's his. Nothing here belongs to Blackwell, Olivia said, stepping forward with the Bible clutched to her chest. My father won that case fairly. It ain't about the case anymore, Reed sneered. It's about what's under the ground. Blackwell knows your pa found silver, and he wants the map showing where. How did he know about the map? Gabe asked. Your pa's trail wasn't hard to follow, Reed told Olivia. Talked to a lot of folks in Missouri before I picked up your trail. One of them was your pa's old mining partner. He remembered your ma keeping important papers in that Bible you're holding so tight. Olivia looked down at the worn book in her hands. So all of this tracking us across the country, the lawsuit, everything was about silver. Men have killed for less, Reed shrugged. And Blackwell's offering $1,000 to whoever brings him that map. Well, he won't be getting it, Gabe declared firmly. Come morning, we're taking you to the sheriff in Clearwater. Attempted murder carries a stiff penalty in Wyoming territory. They locked Reed in the tool shed overnight, with 2 ranch hands standing guard. No one got much sleep, but by morning, preparations were made to transport the prisoner to town. Gabe insisted that Olivia and Ruth accompany them, not wanting to leave them at the ranch in case Reed's companions returned. The small party set out at dawn. Gabe, Olivia, Ruth, and 2 trusted hands escorting the bound Reed. They had been riding for about an hour when they spotted dust on the horizon. Riders coming, Gabe said tensely. Could be Reed's men with reinforcements. They quickened their pace, but it soon became clear they would be intercepted before reaching town. Gabe led them off the trail into a stand of cottonwoods beside a shallow creek. We'll make our stand here if we have to, he said, helping Olivia dismount. Stay behind these rocks. The approaching riders, 6 of them, slowed as they neared the trees. A tall man in an expensive black coat rode at their head. That's Blackwell, Reed called out, earning himself a warning look from Gabe. The man halted his horse just beyond the trees. I know you're in there, Xavier, he called. "Send out Reed and the Harper girl, and the rest of you can ride away unharmed." "Not going to happen, Blackwell," Gabe shouted back. "Turn around and go back to Missouri. There's nothing for you here." Blackwell laughed, a harsh sound. "I've come too far to leave empty-handed. That silver belongs to me as much as it did to Thomas Harper." "The courts didn't think so," Olivia called, ignoring Gabe's attempt to shush her. "Courts can be wrong, miss," Blackwell replied. "Your father cheated me out of my rightful share. I'm just here to collect what's owed." "By threatening an innocent woman," Gabe's voice was cold with anger. "That's not how we do things in Wyoming." "Then perhaps we should discuss this like civilized people," Blackwell suggested. "Face to face without guns." Gabe hesitated, then nodded. "Just you and me in the open. Everyone else stays put." Despite Olivia's protests, Gabe stepped out from the trees, his rifle lowered but ready. Blackwell dismounted and walked forward to meet him. The two men stood about 10 feet apart, sizing each other up. "I'm prepared to be reasonable," Blackwell said. "I'll pay the girl for the map $500. That's more than fair." "The map isn't for sale," Gabe replied, "and neither is Olivia's safety. You and your men need to leave, or we'll be having this conversation in front of a judge." Blackwell's expression hardened. "I see Thomas Harper's daughter has found herself a protector. How touching." He glanced toward the trees where Olivia was hidden. "Consider my offer, Miss Harper. $500 could start a new life for you. Otherwise." He let the threat hang in the air. Before Gabe could respond, the sound of multiple horses approaching from the direction of Clearwater caught everyone's attention. A moment later, Sheriff Davies appeared with 4 deputies. "What's all this?" the sheriff demanded, taking in the standoff. Gabe explained the situation quickly. Blackwell attempted to portray himself as an honest businessman seeking what was rightfully his. But when the sheriff noticed Reed bound and bloodied among Gabe's party, his sympathies clearly shifted. "Seems to me," Sheriff Davies drawled, "that breaking into a man's home and shooting up his property ain't the actions of an honest businessman, Mr. Blackwell." In the end, both Blackwell and Reed were arrested, along with Blackwell's men. The sheriff escorted them all back to Clearwater, where they would be held until a circuit judge arrived to hear the case. "What about the silver?" Olivia asked Gabe as they rode back to the ranch that afternoon. "It's still there, under my family's old farm." Gabe considered this. "That land legally belongs to you, Olivia, the silver too. When this is all settled, if you want to go back to Missouri and claim it, I would understand." She looked at him in surprise. "You think I'd leave you for silver? It's a fortune," he said quietly. "Enough to build any kind of life you wanted." Olivia reached over and took his hand. "I already have everything I want, Gabe Xavier. A home, a family, you. The only reason I'd go back to Missouri would be to sell that land so we could invest the money here in our future together." The love that shone in Gabe's eyes at her words was worth more than all the silver in the world. The legal proceedings against Blackwell and Reed took several months to resolve. During that time, life at Willow Creek Ranch continued, with preparations for Gabe and Olivia's wedding moving forward. They decided to delay the ceremony until after the trial, wanting to start their married life free from the shadow of Blackwell's threats. In September, the circuit judge finally arrived in Clearwater. The trial was brief but definitive. With the evidence of the armed attack on the ranch and the testimony of multiple witnesses, both Blackwell and Reed were convicted. Blackwell received 5 years in territorial prison for conspiracy and attempted robbery, while Reed was sentenced to 10 years for attempted murder. As for the silver mine, the judge confirmed that the land and all its resources legally belonged to Olivia as Thomas Harper's sole surviving heir. She made arrangements through a lawyer to have the property assessed and eventually sold, with a portion of the proceeds to be donated to a fund for orphans, in memory of her parents and siblings. On a perfect autumn day in late September 1877, almost exactly a year after Gabe had found her weeping over her mother's Bible, Olivia Harper became Olivia Xavier. The ceremony was held on the hilltop where Gabe had proposed, now covered with late blooming wildflowers. The entire ranch turned out for the occasion, along with friends from neighboring properties and the town of Clearwater. Ruth stood beside Olivia as her maid of honor, beaming with happiness for her brother and new sister-in-law. Olivia wore the wedding dress she had made herself, simple but elegant, with tiny pearl buttons that had belonged to Gabe's mother sewn along the bodice. As they exchanged vows, Olivia held her mother's Bible, now containing not just her mother's pressed prairie clover, but also the one Gabe had given her in the spring. The old book that had once been a source of tears now represented the continuity between her past and her future, the faith that had sustained her family for generations and would continue to guide her new one. "I now pronounce you man and wife," the preacher declared. "What God has joined together, let no man put asunder." When Gabe kissed her, sealing their union, Olivia felt her heart overflow with joy. The journey that had begun in tragedy had led her to a love stronger and deeper than she had ever imagined possible. The celebration afterward lasted well into the night, with feasting, dancing, and heartfelt toasts to the couple's happiness. When they finally slipped away to the small cabin Gabe had built for them a short distance from the main house, their own private retreat, they were exhausted but blissful. "Mrs. Xavier," Gabe murmured as he carried her over the threshold, "I've been waiting a long time to call you that." "Not as long as I've been waiting to hear it," Olivia replied, wrapping her arms around his neck. That night, as they consummated their marriage with tender passion, the final pieces of Olivia's heart that had been shattered by loss were made whole again in Gabe's loving embrace. Life at Willow Creek Ranch flourished in the years that followed. The proceeds from the sale of the Harper farm and its silver deposit allowed Gabe and Olivia to expand their operations, purchasing additional grazing land and improving their breeding stock. Under their joint management, the ranch became one of the most successful in the territory. Ruth eventually did find love of her own with the new doctor who settled in Clearwater in 1879. Their wedding the following spring gave Gabe and Olivia the opportunity to repay all the support Ruth had given them during their courtship. In the summer of 1880, Olivia gave birth to twins, a boy they named Thomas, after her father, and a girl called Mary for her mother. As she held her children for the first time, with Gabe looking on in wonder and pride, Olivia felt the circle of love and loss that had defined her life close into perfect completeness. On the twins' christening day, Olivia opened her mother's Bible to read a verse she had marked, one that had sustained her through her darkest days, and now seemed to embody the journey that had brought her to this moment of perfect happiness. "Weeping may endure for a night," she read softly, looking from her children to her husband, "but joy cometh in the morning." Gabe's eyes met hers across the cradle where their children slept, and in that gaze was all the love and understanding that had begun with a simple act of kindness, when a grieving woman crying over her mother's Bible had found comfort in the words of a gentle cowboy who had stopped to read a verse with her.